So today's session is about how to break into API product management. My name is Emmanuel Paraskakis, and I've been doing API product management for about 15 years now. As I was preparing for this talk, and here's what we'll cover in this talk. We'll go into what is API product management, why it's a good career for you, where to find API product management jobs before they're even listed online, which I think is very important in 2025. How to prepare for the API PM interview. I've been conducting these interviews for a long time as a VP of product. I've done probably more than 100, so I'll let you know what I expect and how to prepare for these interviews. And then finally, we'll look at what gaps you might have, how to discover those gaps and how to fill them, and we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A. So as I was preparing for this talk, I went looking for some numbers around APIs and API product management. Of course, I came up with a graphic about internet traffic. This is the growth of internet traffic over the years. It's in exabytes per month. And I also plotted some important API milestones on there. So there's a lot of traffic, and it's growing. It'll grow even more with AI and agents and so on. But as I was just looking for numbers and stats around API product management, I was surprised by some numbers. So I want to ask you some questions and have you guess at some of these numbers to see if you're surprised as I was. So number one, we saw the growth of internet traffic, but what percentage of internet traffic is due to APIs? What percentage comes from APIs? Put your answer in the chat, please. For example, put A if you think traffic from APIs is less than 10%, B if you think it's 11 to 30%, and so on. So let's see. E, a lot of D, C, awesome. People are like very bullish about APIs. This is great. C, D, E, B, okay. So most people think that, there's a lot of traffic. So what's the real answer? The real answer, well, according to one report by Cloudflare, is 57%. And that means that most traffic on the internet is from APIs. Now, I think if you had an answer of C or D, you were correct. You were both correct, because by the time that this report was published, I think it's based on 2023 data. By that time, I think the traffic has increased. And of course, there's other reports out there that peg traffic at 70% even. So C or D would be the right answer. The point is, most of the traffic on the internet is due to APIs, which was, amazing for me. Another question, all those APIs, who's product managing these APIs? So I'd like you to guess what percentage of product managers out there are API or platform product managers. The data I have doesn't distinguish between API and platform, so that's the best I have. So A, if you think it's less than 10%, B, if you think it's 11 to 30%, and so on. All right, A, B. Ron has A. It's awesome. Patrick has B. And Scott has A. All right, you guys are doing pretty good at this. So the answer is 5%, at least the one methodology that I saw on LinkedIn. Akash Gupta and Nancy Lee published a little study that they did. They found out that platform PMs, in which they classify API product PMs, were about 5% of the total. And Akash is a really good product manager to follow on LinkedIn. So, most of the traffic, APIs, just 5% of the product managers. And then last question, and I swear I'll get on with the presentation. How much do you think these API and platform product managers make? Maybe do they make more than core product managers? Do they make much more? A, less than 10%, B, 11 to 30, and so on. Let's see. So Rodrigo, Ziad, Kim. So answers kind of all across the board. And you're all kind of right, because it's just studies of numbers that we have to go on. But the numbers I found from levels.fyi, as of last week, this is the median annual total compensation in US dollars in the US for product managers. So that would be the median. It's not the lowest positions or the highest positions. The baseline, which I took to mean a general product manager, sits at about $200,000, according to Levels FYI. Technical PMs, of which API PMs are a part of, sit about 19% above that. So that was the number that kind of was impressive to me. If I summarize all of this, I think there's an opportunity in API product management. So first of all, only a few PMs, only 5% for more than half of the internet traffic. And it pays pretty well. So I think it's something that it's worth paying attention to. All right, so let's move forward. What is API product management and why it's worth pursuing? We'll talk about the challenges and the benefits. So API product management is challenging. I've been doing it for 15 years, and it's quite an involved effort. So first of all, you have to be technical. You have to speak the language of developers. You have to be able to communicate with developers both ways, because developers are going to be your customers, but also you're explaining the market needs and the requirements to other developers, the team that you work with. And those requirements are quite technical. You will need to go into either a lot of technical detail or understand a lot of technical detail in order to be able to have these discussions with your product team. And then there's the what I call the double product manager effect, which is very interesting in the sense that with an API, your product management use cases multiply. So for example, if you have a plain product, like let's say you're the product manager for the Maven platform, well, you have to worry about the use case of building courses, signing up people to look at what's there, and maybe people paying and taking the courses. So the use cases are not that many. You can actually see who's using it and so on. With APIs, your immediate customers are developers that are going to use the API, but they're going to build applications for others. So it's going to multiply the use cases that you need to take into account. So that makes it very interesting, but also very challenging. Bizarrely enough, there's more sales involvement that I've seen, at least in B2B companies. So because it's a very specialized matter, you do get dragged into a lot of sales calls because you're like the expert on APIs, and some of the sales and marketing people are not as technical, so you get called in and get involved too in many of these sales calls. And finally, API PMs, I think, juggle way more stuff than others. So you have to know about SaaS. Delivery of API products, at least public APIs, is mostly a SaaS type of delivery. You have to know developer tools, SDKs and code editors, and you have to understand continuous integration, for example. And you also have to know about UX and product-led growth, because developer portals are very much a product-led growth, self-serve kind of experience. And finally, you have to know about documentation. What makes good documentation, how it's written. You probably won't be doing the documentation, maybe yourself, but you really have to know what good is, because it is the face of the product. So that's quite a lot there. And one of the quick question that I have is, which one of these seems the toughest to you? If you can put it in the chat, I'd be very interested to see. Is it like the technical stuff or the more kind of product management stuff? So Adam says E. And Ziad says B. Yep. Yep. Ron says D. More sales involvement. Yep. That can be tough sometimes, but you also get a lot of feedback in these sales calls. Tim says E. And Rodrigo, I think, changed his mind to C. Yeah, C. C is quite surprised. Was quite surprising to me, but also quite a good challenge. All right, let's move on. Thank you. But API product management is also rewarding. So what I've seen in my 15 years is that API products can be very impactful. Like you see them everywhere. Think of the product managers, for example, at Stripe. They see their work everywhere. So I think it's very, very interesting. And also APIs are have very high retention. You know, if you bake Stripe into, let's say, the Maven platform, you're not going to rip it out unless there's a really good reason. So I think it's very rewarding how these products get to be used by many people. And there's also an aspect of mastery. You will become more technical as you become an expert in APIs. There's a lot to learn, and it's actually, to me at least, it's a very enjoyable process. And there's also a degree of autonomy, which I found very interesting. When you're an API product manager, people tend to start to leave you alone to do your thing, to do your roadmap, because you're like the API person, and you know they don't know exactly what you're doing there. And sometimes, you know, if people come bother you, you can throw technical jargon at them. I think there is, you know, joking aside, I think there is a degree of autonomy. And I'm reminded of a book I read some time ago by Daniel Pink called Drive. Really good book if you can get to it. And in the book, Daniel Pink talks about job satisfaction. What are the elements of job satisfaction? And purpose, mastery, and autonomy were three of those elements. So I find it interesting that I can see it in APIs. All right. So really quick story. I didn't describe my background, but really quick story how I got into API product management. And I promise you we'll draw some conclusions from that and use it in a little bit. So our story starts with me as an entrepreneur, computer science major, with a background in insurance, and we'll see why that's important. So I've been doing a lot of insurance before I got into APIs, and became really an expert in this domain: insurance, reinsurance, and so on. And then in 2008, I came to the US looking for a tech job, like a lot of people. And if you remember, in 2008, it was the middle of the Great Recession. Things were awful. Things were bad. Much worse for jobs than it is today. The stock market was down. People, you know, weren't hiring. It was pretty bad. But I started networking. I started looking for open jobs, and then because of my insurance background, remember I had a lot of background in insurance. I was an expert in that. Because of that background, I was able to find a job at a technology company that built technology for insurance, and it was an entry-level API product management role. So I was a little bit technical. I knew a little bit about APIs. I could code. And I had this domain background. That and a little bit of luck allowed me to get this job, and I started moving on from there. So in the process, I built larger and larger API programs, and then I kind of got stuck because I couldn't figure out my tools and processes. We didn't have books and talks like this back in the day. I accidentally went to this API conference with about 100 people in Detroit in the middle of summer, met my tribe, met the people that I would learn from, and that got me started on a path. I started a meetup group here in San Francisco, more than 1,000 people. I got involved in the Open API Initiative, which is a Linux Foundation group around the specification for APIs. I got to build a lot of tools for other people that build APIs as a VP at Apiary, Oracle, and Smartbird, the people that do Swagger, and affected in the process millions of APIs, how people do work with millions of APIs. That was great. I now speak at all the major API conferences, and I consult and train at my company Level 250. So let's see. We are going to use some of this background as action points for you in a short while. So the way I like to think about careers, and specifically the API PM careers, is this canvas. And on the horizontal, you have API expertise. You could say, I'm an expert, I'm not an expert, and I have domain mastery. And as an example, if you remember, I was like this expert in insurance back in 2008, 2009, but I didn't know that much about APIs. So that was me kind of in the top row, but on the left-hand side. And then, you know, over 15 years, I got to learn a whole lot more about APIs, gave up some knowledge of the domain because I was working mostly in APIs and not doing that much insurance, but it got me to where I am. And if you're somewhere here today, you have to decide whether you're going to go, vertical or horizontal. So are you going to become a domain expert inside your domain? Maybe, your domain is banking or gaming, or you're going to pursue expertise. And people that pursue a lot of expertise without domain mastery, end up usually in technology companies like the Amazons and the Googles and so on. And that's really, really great. And people that don't become technical experts, they become like the gurus of their domain up here on the left-hand side. I think what you should do is kind of stair step your way up and to the right. Maybe you'll become a unicorn where you know everything. Um, I think that's fantastic. You will be untouchable, but aim to be in the top row or in the right-hand column. And we'll talk about ways to do that. The only thing I'd say is don't get stuck in that middle there where you're neither here nor there. Try to do things about your career either in the domain aspect or the API expertise aspect and move forward. All right. Okay, so Ferris is at number 8, wants to get to number 6. Okay, great. We'll talk about how to do that. All right, so key takeaways. I think API product management is rewarding. It's been rewarding to me. Not only does it have job satisfaction, I think it can have more compensation, which is always fantastic. I think you should aim to improve both your domain and technical expertise, but take steps at it. Don't try to do it all at the same time. All right. So next, we're going to talk about where to find an API product management job. And if you think the answer is go online and look at job postings, I think that's wrong in 2025. By the time those jobs get posted, unfortunately, it's too late. There's too many people chasing after jobs, and just too many people throwing resumes at the job, and it's really difficult to stand out. So let's build up a framework on how we're going to do that. And before we do that, I would love to know what frameworks, what domains or industries you think are big on APIs, that are investing on APIs. I talked about insurance. I talked a little bit about banking. What other domains do you think are there? Put in the chat, please. Health. Absolutely. Retail. Yep. Energy. AI. Yeah. Climate. Open banking. Fintech. Huge. Huge right now. Restaurants and especially chains. Telco. We've been selling a lot of API design and API documentation products to telco. So all of these, I think, are right. And I've got my own list here that you can see. And of course, AI is in there, and of course, health and everything you mentioned. But the way I'd like you to approach this is like I did back in 2008. Accidentally, I focused on insurance, and I was able to find my way in insurance. I'm not saying insurance is for you, God forbid, but find your domain. Maybe it's something that you have studied, you're already an expert on, you've worked for a while. So maybe, for example, you worked in the travel domain or in, let's say, e-commerce. But find that niche and focus and concentrate on that niche. And if it's fintech, for example, and maybe fintech is a good one because it's undergoing a lot of changes. Banking specifically is undergoing some legislation change, which means banks will have to create APIs. So that's an opportunity there. So pick your niche, pick your domain, and kind of ignore everything else. Focus on one domain. If it's going to be payment companies, focus on that. And it will become apparent why. So the second point in the framework is don't just search for random API product management openings and apply to everything, and obviously not in every domain. But what you can do is, go to your favorite tool where you search for jobs, for example, LinkedIn, and set up job alerts. And when you set up job alerts, don't just say, hey, it needs to be senior API PM, and be very specific about that. Just go search more broadly. And what this will do is it'll bring back results in your email daily of companies that are hiring for adjacent roles. So, for example, you might be looking for an API product manager job, but you'll also see a lot of engineering or architects or sales engineers jobs and so on. So, good example here. I don't know if you can see it in the slides, but JP Morgan Chase is hiring a senior director of software engineering for wealth management tech and something related to APIs. So I bet that, if you see a lot of these engineering positions for APIs being hired, I'll bet eventually you see an API product management job. And, same thing here for American Express. They have this VP of product digital banking platform job. Well, that VP of product is going to hire probably API product managers. So this is a way for you to start thinking ahead of time where these jobs are going to go and show up. So if I were you, I'd be, starting to follow JPMC or Amex or, obviously Stripe here. And companies ramping up their investment in other roles will eventually hire in API product management. Also, another resource for product managers, not quite the same, but another resource is Lenny's newsletter. If you haven't, well, if you've heard of it and if you are in Lenny's newsletter, put Lenny's in the chat. Shout out to that community. It's pretty amazing. So the newsletter and the podcast, and when you pay for that community, the Slack channel that they have is pretty amazing. So in the Slack channel, there's all kinds of conversations with your peers, and often you will see these PM jobs being posted way before they hit the public. So yeah, Lenny's is awesome. And yeah, Tim at the Lenny's meetup last night. I try to go to those meetups, every month. Awesome. All right, great. Next thing to do would be to find out who's about to invest in APIs. So my practical tip would be to go on Google Alerts and set up an alert for, let's say, as an example, API and Series B or whatever other stage of company you'd like. And what that will do is it'll bring back news on a daily basis in your email about companies that are announcing their investment. So, for example, again, very small here, but if you see this bottom one, Method Financial raises 41.5 million to compete with Plaid, and so on. They talk about APIs. So Method Financial has 41 million in the bank. It's competing in APIs. What are they going to do? They're going to go and build product, and they're going to hire, and probably they're going to hire. I would be very surprised if they don't have a need for an API product manager in the next few months. And maybe they already have them. Maybe they're going to advertise for them. Same thing for setting up an alert around, let's say, API and partnership. Companies often partner together. Let's say you have a bank that's partnering with an insurance company. I don't know, boring example, but something like that. Any companies that partner are going to use APIs to exchange data. So look out for that, because if they're going to be building and using APIs to talk between them, they're going to need product managers. So that's another thing to go look out for. And if you're a company that's mentioning APIs in your press release, well, you're serious about it. You're investing in it, and sooner or later you will need an API product manager. All right. The fourth thing I would do, and please, please, please don't skip this step. And I'm actually gonna quickly show you a couple of things here. So look at what's happening with API conferences. Go look at the agendas and past speakers from API-focused conferences. A good one is API Days. Let's go take a look at that. API Days, and if you go look on their website, they have like 7, 8 conferences all around the world for 2025. If you go and look at the New York one that's coming up, you'll see, well, first of all, you'll see the logos of all the companies that are sending people to the conference. And if companies are sending people to the conference, they're serious about APIs. And there's our friend American Express. Remember, they were hiring for that, what was it, VP PM job, I think. So, you can go and network with those folks there. And then scroll down, you can see who is sponsoring. It's a bunch of API companies, sure. But more interestingly, I think there's the speaker line. And the speakers are the thought leaders in the industry. They're the people that companies pay to go speak and influence others at these conferences. And if you start looking through the list, you'll see, all these companies: Quest Diagnostics, Lego Group, Capital One, a bank, API Evangelist, Ken Lane. He's very often he's a friend of mine. He's very often at these conferences. Let's see, Capital One, again, bank, Citi, bank, JP Morgan Chase. Oh, remember they were hiring for that role. Well, this is the VP of PM for JP Morgan Chase. If you can, make it to that conference, because you can start networking and you can see what they talk about, and start getting involved and building a relationship. And Suman, I've heard him talk from US Bank, really good speaker. Capital One again, Capital One, Shake Shack. What do we have? ARM, GitLab, GitHub, and so on. You get the idea, right? So these are the movers and shakers and the people that you need to network with. And so once you locate these thought leaders, if you can connect with them physically, great. Or follow them on LinkedIn and watch what they're posting. If they're doing things like API design, developer experience, API governance, you can start to comment thoughtfully. Please, no auto-generated AI comments. Those are horrible. So start building a relationship with these folks. All right. And the fifth step is look for companies where their API is a product. Stripe and Twilio are the obvious examples, but there's also a resource. You'll have the link in the slides, called API Landscape. It has everything to do with APIs in there. All the companies working on APIs. If you go search for API products, all these companies that are Twilio or Stripe-like will show up, and then you can see what they're all about. And obviously, these companies prioritize APIs. They will have the budget. They will eventually hire API product managers. All right. And as Kevin says, API Days New York is a fintech type API conference. They tend to do themes for the various conferences around the world. All right. So kind of to recap, network within the industry, network within the domain, build relationships before you make the ask. Nobody's going to, help you out too much if you do a cold ask. So make sure you build those real, actually, relationships. Make sure you're showcasing your skills. Think about personal branding. I know it's a little bit of an ick factor there, but it's a thing that you have to do. And above all, network. And remember that in 2025, by the time a job opening is posted, it's just going to be too late. So look ahead and network with the people that are going to post the jobs ahead of time. All right. Okay, next section is you networked, you found a job, you got a PM interview. Fantastic. So as a VP of products for APIs, I've interviewed hundreds of folks, and I can tell you what I saw there. I can tell you the questions I asked, what to look for, how to prepare. So let's do that. But before we do it, I want to know in the chat who's already gone through an API PM interview. Not a generic PM interview, but a specific one for API PM. Maybe you can put yes in the chat if you have. All right, Stephanie, yes. Nancy, yes. Kim, yes. Tim, yes, sir. All right, so from you folks, I would love to get your feedback on what I give you here. If that's what you found, or if you found anything else. So let's get to it. So if you're talking to me, the hiring manager, maybe I'm the VP of PM or the CPO or some lead product manager, and the interview will be roughly as long as this talk, maybe 45, 50 minutes. And initially it'll start easy, tell me about yourself, like everybody asks that. And then it's going to be generic product management stuff. I need to make sure that you kind of are a product manager. So I'll go through that fairly quickly. And I do have questions I ask. I won't go through them in this talk, but you can message me later. I can give you resources. But the real interview, in my opinion, starts when we start talking about APIs. And that's where I start to pay real attention. And of course, at the end, I'll leave time for their questions, which are also something I pay attention to. So let's dive into the actual API stuff. So first of all, I will start with questions around understanding your experience with APIs. So I would say things like, how do you validate ideas and collect customer feedback for APIs? And what I'm looking for there is, do you actually talk to customers? Do you actually solicit feedback? Did the company you're in actually let you go near to customers? Then I'll do things like, hey, tell me about your involvement in API design and developer experience. And sometimes I hear, oh, the architects and the engineers did the API design, which is a smell to me, and I will dig in to find out why that was happening. And then I'll say things like, hey, can you give me an example of bad API design? And if you can come up with one, great. I might ask about process at the company, and I'm not looking to see if your company that you're at has a good process, but I'm looking to see if you can talk about it. Also, if you can actually demo APIs to customers and so on. So that would be kind of the first set of questions. The second set of questions is going to be more hands-on. I will ask you to bring up the developer portal of an API you've worked on in the past. And I would say, hey, give me an example. So if you worked at Stripe, I'll say, okay, bring up the Stripe developer portal. We'll go all through it. And sometimes people say, oh, it was a private API. It was behind a firewall, so we can't see that here. I'm like, okay, great. Do you have a favorite API? Do you have another API that you like that you can show me? And if you should have one, if you don't have one, that tells me that you're not curious and you're not looking out there to be inspired by others' developer experiences. So in any case, we'll bring up a dev portal and I'll start to browse through it and ask questions. I'll ask questions on sign-up, authentication, error codes, data formats, and so on. And what I'll do is I'll ask about design decisions that were made. I'll say, that looks strange. Why did this happen? And maybe there's a good reason. Maybe you'll say, well, we wanted to do the right thing, but use the right method, but the customers all told us, for some reason, our frameworks in this industry only support specific methods, and that's why we did. That's great. You listen to customers, you know what you're doing, and so on. So I'm looking about the why behind design decisions. And I'll make it a conversation. It can be a back and forth. I may give you feedback, maybe say, hey, these are the best practices that I've seen work, or you might teach me something. I always learn something at one of these interviews. And I'm not looking for perfect. I'm looking for you being able to have a discussion about these things and having thought about these things in the past rather than being inexperienced. All right, next one, I will ask about how you ran an API product. So you built an API product. How did you evolve it? How do you run it? So I'll talk about, monitoring and metering and pricing and analyzing what's there. I'll talk about onboarding on your developer portal. I'll talk about, I want to know what's wrong. I'll talk about, hey, did something happen? Did you have a security issue? Did the API go down? How did you handle it? How did you know? What did you do as a product manager? And then, of course, I'll slide in a question of how do you evolve the product? And that's a sneaky one because that's like the touchiest subject in APIs. It's all about the versioning and breaking changes of the API. So I'll make sure to ask you that. And really, I'm looking for things that went wrong and the stories that you can tell me about how you coped, what you learned, what you put in place so things didn't happen again. All right. Number 4, if this is a senior role, and this won't be for every role, I will talk about some API specs. So not every interview will have this, but if you're a senior API product manager, I expect you to know things like OpenAPI and JSON schema, or even perhaps GraphQL if the role involves it. And I will talk with you about, what's good, what's bad, what's your experience, what tooling you've used. When we talk about toolings, I'll also look into insights that you have about user experience, which I think is important. And, one of the smells I look for is if the engineers at your current or previous job don't let you touch any of the specs and the open API, that's a smell again. I will dig into why this is happening, what's going on there. And finally, if I do have time, what I'll do is I'll dive into my product. I'll bring up my developer portal and I'll say, hey, can you roast my product? So I'll ask them, you know, tell me what you see. Do you see anything bad? I mean, products are always going to have things wrong with them. So I'm looking to see if they can identify, prioritize. So don't tell me every little detail. Tell me about the big things that you see that are wrong, and they will be there. And also, have you prepared? Have you done this ahead of time? Have you done your homework before coming to the interview? And if you can locate the problems, can you make good suggestions about how to fix them? Will you even speak up about the problems? Or are you too timid to speak up or too insecure to speak about problems, which I want to know ahead of time? And then finally, I'll make sure I have time for your questions, which I expect you to bring to the interview. And I do pay a lot of attention to that. And I think other interviewers pay a ton of attention to that as well. So that's the API PM interview in a nutshell. Obviously, there's a whole lot more involved to that. But what I'm looking for is the usual things like, have you actually shipped APIs? Can you talk and say and get feedback from me? Will you kind of push back against feedback? Are you a BSer, or are you saying real things from your experience? Can you talk to developers? Are you passionate and curious? Were your questions good? How do you differentiate yourself? And above all, I'm looking for war stories, right? So I want to know about that one time that you got to the top of Hacker News because your authentication API was down and customers started complaining and they wrote a blog post. It went up all the way up to the top of Hacker News, and how you coped with that and how you dealt with it, and what stuff you put in place so that it would never happen again. True story. So I'll be looking for that. All right. So key takeaways here. And Sven has a question. Let's do questions at the end. Um, uh, and that's a very good one. I'll answer that. The question is, are API PMs capable of designing in OpenAPI? We'll talk about that in the ending questions. So key takeaways here, have a story, no product management, no APIs, know the market that the company is in and news around the market, what new legislation, emerging tech is affecting the market, know the company, its challenges, again from the news, know their products, have looked at their products, know the language that they use, and above all, know the interviewer. You remember, you should be networking with them online, in conferences, in events. You should know a lot about them. Maybe go watch. If you want to interview with me, you go watch the talk that I gave just now, right? It's obvious. So do that research, do the homework, and it will really pay off in your interview. All right. So let's talk briefly about the gaps that you might have, and you'll start to um, uh, uh, the gaps will start to emerge as we talk here. And I think as Sven said there. What are your gaps? Put them in the chat. So I suspect that Swen says, hey, am I expected to know how to design and spec an API? It's possibly a thing that Swen is worried about and wants to find out how to improve. So anything else that you saw there? What kind of gaps do you think you have? Put in the chat. Yep, and Ziad will talk about the difference between API design and API specs. All right. Okay. So whatever those gaps are, I think you can address them by, first of all, following everything in these slides. You'll get the slides and a recording at the end of the meeting. It'll get sent to you. Next thing you can do, of course, network in person at tech meetups. So one good resource is Luma, and we talked about Lenny's community. So if you go, here's Lenny's community, where you go to sign up. If you go to Luma, you can go to discover events all around, tech events all around the world. So here's a bunch of US cities and events. San Francisco has 52 events. Uh, Asia Pacific, Europe, Africa, they're all over the place. So sign up for those tech events, go to those tech events, and you'll meet a lot of motivated people, and you'll get ahead. I would say get involved with APIs at your organization, and you can start easy. You can start, getting involved in how to name things if you have domain expertise. But do get involved in the process of building APIs at your organization. I would say if you don't know how to code, learn to code. You don't have to, ship production code at Google, but maybe go learn Python and, make a script that solves a problem in your everyday life for your team and so on. Or use the company APIs to publish a demo that can be useful to somebody. So I see the questions coming in. We'll come to the questions. I would say anybody that likes a question, give it a thumbs up emoji so we can upvote it and make sure we answer the question. Do your research on architecture and standards. Go read that RFC. This is what an RFC looks like. It's not like very inspiring, but it has a lot of technical knowledge that you should know. So make an effort to go read those technical documents. I would say contribute to open source if you can. There's projects like OpenAPI, Async API, and AEP. And one thing you can do is go on GitHub and look for a label that's called good first issue. Like, for example, let me show you AEP. These other issues are filtered for good first issue. And what happens here is these are issues that they think people that are starting out can contribute to. So here, for example, make examples consistent. Okay, that's a way to get started. You get to know about this, you get to contribute, you get your GitHub activity up, and you also get to meet people. I think it's a win. And then finally, we showed the API PM career canvas. You'll get an email, plot where you are there, plot your path to improve. And of course, take a course, learn API skills. And I'll briefly talk here about my courses that I do. I'll plot them against the API PM career canvas. So let's say you're somewhere over here. You need to know more about APIs. You want to become an intermediate user of APIs. I do have a course coming up in February. It's called API Fundamentals for Product Managers. You can take that and very quickly, it's not going to take you, years like it did me. Very quickly, you can upgrade your knowledge. And then I've got a follow-on course if you are wanting to be an expert. It hasn't been announced yet. You're kind of the first to hear it, but I will announce it in the next couple of days. It's called API Product Mastery for Experienced PMs. And there we truly make you an expert in APIs. And I think the value that's there is you don't have to spend all this time kind of looking for information. You can get it in one package. At least that's how I see it. All right. So if you want to sign up for these courses, and we'll go to Q&A right after that. If you want to sign for any course, here, for example, is my API Fundamentals for Product Managers course. It starts on February 18, goes for 2 weeks. It has 4 live sessions of about 2 hours each. And a couple of optional Q&A sessions where you bring your topics. And as a bonus for the first cohort, there's a free one-on-one hour that you can book with me to do anything you'd like: consulting, mock interview, talk about a topic deeper, talk about your career, whatever you need. And today, what I'm going to do, and thank you for attending this session, is I'm going to have a code for the first 10 signups for this course. So the first 10 signups for this course get 25% off. If you scan this QR code, that takes you directly there. And actually, let me grab the link and put it in the chat so you can have it. After the first 10 signups, which I expect to go within the day, you can still use a discount code for 15% off. This will come in the email that you'll get with the recording and the slides after this is over. So do sign up for that. I'm going to stop sharing now, and we're going to go to Q&A. But if you want me to bring up the QR code again, you can let me know, and we'll do that. So let's go for your questions. Let me stop sharing. All right. Okay. So, okay, I'm going to go with the last question that I see here, and then I'm going to scroll up. So Adam is asking about the importance of a dev portal and how it connects with product-led growth. So it's a good question. The way I think about it is developers like and prefer to self-serve. Like nobody wants to get, because a developer wants to get on a sales call and wants to get sold by your salespeople. They want to experience the API themselves first. So this is very much in line with product-led growth. For example, you would expect to land in a dev portal, understand immediately what's there for you. Like if you go to the Twilio dev portal, for example, it's very clear immediately what they do and what the use cases are. And is this going to be useful to you? And then you want to see immediately the type of developer tools that you would expect to see there as a developer. Like, how do I get my API key? How do I make my first API call? Can I make the first API call quickly? And do you have SDKs and other tools that I'm going to be able to use? And this progressive discovery that people do, and they say, oh, aha, I made my first API call. Now I can move further. This is all part of PLG. And I think product-led growth is the best use case. Developer portals are the best use case for product-led growth. Okay. Let's see. Next question. Henry, reading RFCs. Yes, your architects and senior engineers will be very thankful. Would you consider a PM that is experienced with APIs but hasn't been an API PM in the past? Absolutely. I think it's a label. If you're experienced with APIs, then you probably can do the job. I would say if the job that you are going to take on is expected to handle a large API portfolio, then that might not be for you. I might want to see you move through, product managing one API and then move on to more. But definitely, experience with APIs pays. Let's see. Yep, Open API. Do you expect PMs to be capable of designing and specing APIs with Open API? I would say, as I pointed out in the slide, I think as a senior PM, you should. If you're going to be managing a large API portfolio, if you're going to be making decisions on the API, I think it's something you better learn. I don't expect entry level and product manager level folks to know the spec. I think it's something that you learn over time, but definitely for a senior. And again, for a senior PM, it's going to be very good interaction with the engineers and the architects if you at least know what to expect and understand with Open API. And this goes into the next question from Ziad. How would you explain the difference between API design and API specs? Very good question. API design is all about the usability of the API. It's about the decisions that you're making for what the product should look like. So think of it in a UI-based product. We would have designers working on Figma, doing wireframes that you could take and show to others. Maybe you can show your prospective customers or the market and get feedback on. I think API design can be the same thing. You can prototype. You can start thinking about what should be there, how to build the product with intent, and it's all about the usability. I think API specifications, or more specifically, API description documents, are all about how to express the design. So in our example that we used before, this would be the Figma for the wireframe. So API design would be the wireframes, and Open API or API specs would be the Figma, the tool that you actually use for that. Does that make sense? Okay. So Balaji says measurement and engagement is key. Absolutely. You have to measure just like any other product out there. You're going to have analytics, you're going to have metrics, and you should pay attention to that. Are API calls failing? Are people having a difficult time with specific API calls? You should be measuring all that. Are there usage patterns? Is there growth? You should be definitely monitoring all of that. Okay, so we're coming to the end of this, and if you do have any more questions, throw them in the chat here. If not, we're gonna close this session out, and you will get a slides and recording in the email. And David just signed up for the course. Thank you, David. I'm excited to see you there. It's gonna be amazing. And so you'll get a lot of information in an email, and you'll get this recording, and also connect to me on LinkedIn, and we can resume the chat there. You can ask me questions, follow my content, comment, and so on. I look forward to connecting with you all. All right. Well, thank you very much for today. Thanks for attending. This has been really exciting for me, and I hope you learned something. I hope you can put all of this to use. Go make a plan, go network, and go learn more about APIs. Thank you. Bye-bye.